Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on CELPIP Live. You know we start each episode with some trivia. Here's your question for the day. Which is the longest river in Canada? Let me know the answer in the comments below. You can also share this image and your answer on Instagram with the hashtag CELPIP Live, and we may feature it on our feed. I will reveal the response towards the end of our show. For now, let's begin. If you're new here, CELPIP Live is an interactive YouTube series made to help CELPIP test takers understand more about the CELPIP test. If you're about to write the test, please subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as we go live with lessons. In today's episode, we're discussing task 1 of the speaking section. Brandy is back and ready to guide you on giving advice. Let's go say hello to her. Hi, Brandy. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you, Ishwati. It seems like spring has officially begun here in Vancouver, so we're all enjoying some beautiful sunshiny weather.
Yes, spring has sprung. Yeah. So I'm going to let you get started. For the people who are watching, if you have questions, please write it down in the live chat, and Brandy can answer it after her lesson. Do note that if you have been following us on Instagram and if you have been looking at our posts, this is an interactive session, so we will be asking you questions as well. So if you have a note paper and pencil, that will be great. You'll be able to participate in the class as it's going on. So Brandy, you're up.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen, so please give me a moment to do that. All right, so we should be good to go there. So yes, today we're going to continue working on our speaking skills. We're focusing in on task 1, which will always ask you to give advice. So in this episode, I'd really like to go over a past test question from a real CELPIP test. We are going to listen to a test taker give his answer to that question. But as we're discussing the answer, I'm really hoping that all of you watching today can think about how you would answer the exact same question on this test. I invite you to type in some of your ideas as they come to you throughout the session. You can type them right into that live feed, and there will be an opportunity at the end of today's session to share some of your ideas. So we'll go from there and hope to involve some of you with the lesson today. So I've got a few things I wanted to mention about the speaking test in general, just before we get into that practice today. So first of all, there are 8 tasks in total on the CELPIP speaking test. And for each question you're asked, you will be given a short amount of time to prepare your answer. You will have paper and pen during the actual test, so it's strongly recommended that you write down a couple of notes and ideas to help guide you as you're preparing this answer. Now, when it comes time to actually speak, you will be recording yourself into a microphone right in front of your computer. At no time will you ever face a human examiner on this test. So I'm hoping to reassure all of you so you'll be a little bit less nervous. The raters are going to listen to your recordings later on, and that's where the scores will come from. There are numerous raters, by the way, that will listen to your answers. It's not scored just by one person. There are several. Now, each task that you complete is going to assess a very particular English skill. So here they are. This is your entire speaking test from start to finish. So you can see task 1, which is what we're focusing on today, always asks to give advice. But as you glance at the rest of your chart here, you'll see that there are many other skills that you would need to prepare for before you took the CELPIP speaking test. Now, looking at our preparation time over here on the right-hand side, you always will have at least 30 seconds to start thinking of your ideas before you record your voice. But in 2 cases, you will be given a full minute. So the test screen itself will let you know how much time you have. And then when you are recording your voice, normally you would speak for 60 seconds, but there are 2 tasks here, task 1 and 7, where you'll have to speak for just a little bit longer. So these are both 90-second tasks. Now, a word about scoring before we get into our practice question today. The speaking test is scored on levels from M, which you see here at the bottom of your screen. This demonstrates a low beginner, somebody that's just starting out with their language studies. So an M stands for minimal proficiency. And as you climb this chart to the very top, you'll see that level 12 is the highest score that anybody could achieve. So if you're earning a 12 on your speaking test, it indicates you've got very advanced proficiency. And every level here has its own corresponding description. So a level 8, for example, is a good response. Level 9 is considered effective, and so on and so forth. So we're going to talk a little bit about the skills that you'll need to demonstrate in your answers on this test so you can understand how your score will be awarded to you. Now, there are 4 different categories or dimensions, we like to call them, that the raters are going to listen for as they're hearing your answers on this test. The first one is called the content and the coherence. So it's important to present an acceptable number of main ideas that are going to answer the question at hand. So today, for example, we're looking at giving advice to a friend. So on this test, the raters would assess how many logical pieces of advice you have to offer your friend based on the question on that test. You'll also want to provide examples and details to fully support each suggestion that you put forth. This is going to really enhance the quality of your answer. So the more specific your idea is, and the more specific the language and so on, the more you're going to maximize your score here for your content ideas. Now, coherence is the other part of this answer. Coherence speaks to how the entire piece fits together and flows well or connects. So it has to do, I guess, a little bit with organization. So there should be a very clear beginning, middle, and end. We often use transitions to introduce when another main idea is coming. So all of those things are important as you're being assessed in this first dimension. So with that in mind, we're going to actually look at this practice question now that we're going to work with today. Again, this was once a real question on a past CELPIP test. I'm going to read it out loud now. As we're discussing this, again, I invite you to type any of your ideas about how you would answer this question. You can share those in the live feed. So this one says, your friend has just graduated with a business degree and has been offered a job overseas. Although the job would be an excellent opportunity, she is not sure about moving so far away from her friends and family. Give her advice on what she should consider when making her decision. So what we'll do next is I'm going to play for you a real response that was recorded by a test taker on this past test. And as we listen to his answer, we're going to follow along with the transcript. On the real test, you would never have a transcript. The raters would simply listen to the recording of your voice, and that's where they'll give you the score. But because we're practicing together today, I think it's most helpful if we can all at least see the words on the screen as we listen. So we'll do it that way. So as we're listening this first time, what I'd like us to do is focus strictly on the content ideas. I'm hoping that all of you can help me determine how many suggestions or pieces of advice this speaker gives to his friend to help him decide if he should really move overseas or not. So how many pieces of advice and what is that advice? Let's listen to this answer now.
Hi, Mark. I really think you have got an excellent opportunity to work overseas. You know, it's going to be a great experience for you. I know there might be some time, you know, when you might want to stay with your family, with your colleagues, but you know, this kind of opportunity doesn't come every time. So I really recommend you to go overseas and at least have some experience. Try to learn the culture, try to see different people. This is how you get the experience in your life. This is how you see things from different point of view. I think once you spend some quality time in other country and overseas, you know, then again you always have the choice to come back to your family, but it's all a matter of time before you grow up in your new roles. So I strongly think that you should take this opportunity, and you never know, like you may like that place. You're right. So listen, until you try that thing, you never know if that thing will, you know, work out for you or it won't work out for you. It's always good that if things work out, but if in case it doesn't work out, you know what, you can always come back and look for job here. But you know what, one more thing, if you look at job here and if you have an experience in overseas, you'll always be given preferences. So always keep this in mind, give this thing in mind, that try to explore as much as possible.
So some nice ideas presented there. What I'd like to do is show us how many sort of suggestions, I guess, this speaker presents in his answer. So all of the yellow highlighted phrases on the screen now represent all the instances where this speaker was offering suggestions to his friend to help him decide, I guess, if the friend should move overseas or not. So I really like the speaker's introduction. The first phrase he says is basically, it'll be an excellent opportunity to go overseas. He says, it will be a great experience for you. So his position is made clear, and you notice he's supporting his friend. That's a good approach to take for this particular question. The second example there on your screen says, I really recommend you to go overseas and at least have some experience. So the speaker has basically restated his position that he started with. We don't have any new ideas, but we still have the suggestion that it will be a great experience to go overseas so far. Our third idea once again says, this is how you get experience in your life. This is how you see things from a different point of view. So again, if you have a different point of view, that's just having a new experience. So far, really one suggestion has been presented. The next idea says that the friend might grow up in his new role. And our speaker once again says, I strongly think that you should take this opportunity. Try that thing. So although we don't actually have the word experience here this time, all of those ideas mean more or less the same thing. If you have a new role and try out that new opportunity, you're still having a new experience. So again, so far we've got really one suggestion or one piece of advice. Finally, in the conclusion, our speaker once again says, if you have experience overseas, and try to explore as much as possible. So although this answer flows quite well from beginning to end, it's clearly organized with a strong introduction and a conclusion. All the way throughout this answer in the 90 seconds, really only one piece of advice has been offered. And to summarize, it's all about having a new experience or opportunity overseas. So the content area of this response is a little bit weaker than it might have been had this speaker given several different pieces of advice with more specific details. Now, at least I'm glad to see that the speaker has given a couple of specific examples to demonstrate to his friend the type of experience that he might earn. So you can see that the bolded and underlined phrases. Our speaker says, you will learn about the culture and meet people. And at the bottom, he mentions about having a better resume. He speaks about getting job preferences if he returns home. So that does demonstrate some decent supporting examples. But again, there aren't that many pieces of advice offered. So that would be considered a weakness for the content. The organization is a little bit better. The coherence piece is fine. But again, there's just one suggestion. So that would be something that this test taker would want to improve upon. So again, as we're talking about this answer, I'm hoping you're still coming up with your own pieces of advice. What would you tell Mark if this was your question? Continue, please, if you'd like, to share some of those ideas in our live feed. We're going to move on to the second dimension that the raters are going to assess to give you the score for your answers. They're going to look closely at your vocabulary. And this will involve, of course, your word choice. So all of the words that you use in your answer should be accurate and they should be suitable for the task at hand. They should make sense and flow very naturally in the speech. Of course, we want to use these words accurately, but we're also hoping to demonstrate a nice range of words. We don't want to just repeat the same word or expression over and over again. Repetition like that often causes boredom for the listener. So you will maximize your score here by using very precise and specific and high level or interesting language, but also having a nice range, a good variety. So we can see here, again, I've taken just a quick glance here and highlighted in green a lot of the expressions and words that I feel that our test taker is using quite well. So we see he uses language like great experience, stay with your family, with your colleagues, go overseas, he says. He talks about culture, point of view, quality time. And he uses some very natural expressions more towards the bottom. He says things like work out for you, or in case it doesn't work out. And he mentions you'll always be given preferences. Always keep this in mind and try to explore as much as possible. So I think all of these examples demonstrate some very nice word choice. There is, however, a slight problem, and this speaks more to the repetition. I don't know if you noticed, but there are two different words or two different phrases that this speaker uses over and over again, and it's quite noticeable. I'm hoping right now that maybe some of you can help me to identify the repeated expressions. Do you see any expressions there that have simply been overused? Feel free to type in some of your answers there in the live feed, and we'll see if we can get any. give you about 10 seconds to think about it, and we'll move on. All right. Okay, I'm going to show you now the repetitions that I found when I went through this answer. There are two of them, as you can see here. The first one is that expression, you know. I think it's effective to use this expression because he is talking to a friend. It's a casual way to bridge the ideas together in the answer. It's just that the expression itself has been used about 4 times. So starting at the top and all the way down, we get, you know, you know, you know, you know what. So I think had the speaker come up with a slightly different way of expressing that, it would have shown a greater variety, which just would have been best. Oh,
Brandy, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you did ask for people to suggest, and somebody has suggested experience. I just wanted to chip in that.
Thank you.
It was a little after 10 seconds, but.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. Yes, the word experience is another repetition, you're right. Yeah. And I guess we really emphasize that, I think, when we looked at our content area. That word's just been used over and over, and it's really the only suggestion that he has. So you're absolutely right. That word experience is a repetition for sure. The one that troubled me the most, and the one that if I could sit with this test taker and give him one piece of advice about his vocab, it would be that word thing. You can see that right towards the bottom of the screen. He's used the word thing 5 times. So not only do we have a repetition, the word thing itself is so general and so vague. You know, any object in the English language can be considered a thing. So when you're speaking or writing for that matter, please try your best to replace that word thing with an actual specific idea or object. So for example, look at the first one. Our test taker has said, listen until you try that thing. You never know if that thing will work out for you. Maybe he could have said, you know, so listen until you try moving overseas. You never know if that will be the right decision for you or not. So always look for ways, again, to show a variety, but also show some specific language. All right, so the repetition is a little bit of a weakness compared to some of the other suitable word choices that he has. All right, let's move on to our listenability factor. This is our 3rd dimension, and the raters are simply trying to see how comfortable you are speaking publicly. This is all about speech delivery skills. So the basics need to be covered, right? We need to have strong pronunciation so that everybody can understand the words you speak. If you have an accent, don't worry about that, please. Just make sure that you are stressing the words in the right places. That's all we need to hear. The rhythm and the intonation will help the listener follow along with you. So you'll notice that as you're speaking or as you're listening to people speak in English, it's very musical. The voice tends to rise and fall naturally using intonation. And we do this often to draw attention to an important word, or often to let the listener know that a main idea has begun and then finished, and we move on again. Hopefully, you're practicing your speaking at home so that you can get from the beginning of your answer to the end with very few pauses and very few interjections. Sometimes when we don't know what we're going to say next, we make these funny sounds and we say, It's okay to do that once in a while, but if you are doing that all the way through the answer, it's going to really frustrate and distract your listener. So that takes practice. We need to somehow find a way to speak fluently from beginning to end with few pauses. Now, there are some other qualities to listenability, as you see here. The speakers, or the raters, will assess your grammar and your sentence structure. But what I'd like to do right now is I'd like us to listen to this answer one more time. And as you're listening, please just try to assess the top 2 criteria here on your screen. Try to figure out again if our speaker today shows clear pronunciation and natural rhythm. If you notice any long pauses or if he interjects too much, you can also comment on that in the live feed. Okay, so listen in and we'll talk about his performance after we've heard it one more time. Here we go now.
Hi, Mark. I really think you have got an excellent opportunity to work overseas. You know, it's going to be a great experience for you. I know there might be some time, you know, when you might want to stay with your family, with your colleagues, but you know, this kind of opportunity doesn't come every time. So I really recommend you to go overseas and at least have some experience. Try to learn the culture, try to see different people. This is how you get the experience in your life. This is how you see things from different point of view. I think once you spend some quality time in other country at overseas, then again you always have the choice to come back to your family, but it's all a matter of time before you grow up in your new roles. So I strongly think that you should take this opportunity, and you never know, like you may like that place. You're right. So unless and until you try that thing, you never know if that thing will, work out for you or it won't work out for you. It's always good that if things work out, but if in case it doesn't work out, you know what? You can always come back and look for job here. But you know what? One more thing. If you look at job here and if you have an experience in overseas, you'll always be given preferences. So always keep this in mind. Keep this thing in mind that try to explore as much as possible.
Okay. So I'm hoping as you were following there, you were able to understand clearly all the words he was speaking. Even without looking at the transcript, it's very clear. So pronunciation is strong, and there is definitely a very comfortable and natural rhythm to his voice and intonation. Now, English is not the speaker's first language, as we can tell by listening to an accent, but his speech presentation skills are quite strong. There may have been a handful of small pauses as he was thinking of the next idea. And I think when he uses that expression, I think that's almost his way of interjecting and trying to think about what comes next. But it all flows smoothly together. So that part of his listenability is actually quite strong. To look at the grammar and sentence structure, this part's easier to do if you actually see the transcript. So what we have here are all of the connecting words. Whether these are transitions or conjunctions, you can see them highlighted or I guess underlined on your screen. So at a quick glance, I'm noticing more of the basic connections. I'm seeing words like so, and but, which are fine to use. We will all use those words at least sometimes in our responses because they're very common. But perhaps a slightly bigger variety of connecting words there might have been helpful. I'm pleased to see that we do have some transitions though. We get words like, but then again, and one more thing. So again, these transitions are actually helping connect the pieces together, which supports that coherence that we talked about earlier. His sentence structure isn't perfect all the way through, but he's starting to demonstrate some complexity. And that's what the raters are really listening in to see if they can determine. So there are 3 stronger examples here that have been highlighted blue on your screen. In this first example, our speaker is correctly demonstrating 2 different types of sentence structure together. So when he says, try to learn the culture, try to see different people, he's creating what we call an imperative structure. He's giving a command, and then he follows that with a simple sentence structure. This is how you get experience in your life. He does that so fluently and naturally, and that's fantastic. That second example there is a nice example of a compound sentence. He's connecting 2 shorter ideas using the word so, and he does so correctly. At the very bottom, this is likely the best example of his sentence structure all the way through this answer. He demonstrates a complex compound sentence. So he's using and if on the one end and using so on the other. So what he's done there is he's actually connected 3 or 4 different ideas together correctly using this language. So again, some complexity is developing. It's not perfect all the way through, but there's definitely some examples. Now, there are a handful of tiny little grammar mistakes. These are the red words that you see on the screen, but they're so small, it's not going to have a great effect on the score, really. When you look at the first one, the speaker says, from different point of view. All he's done is he's forgotten the article. It's not a big deal. He should have said, from a different point of view. That second example, he says, in other country. Well, that's just a small word choice error. It should be in another country. And then down at the bottom, he's got some extra words that we don't need. We can take out those words that. And again, we have an article and a preposition error. So these mistakes might be noticeable as we listen, but they don't affect our understanding of the idea. So again, making these small little mistakes once in a while won't have a huge effect on your score. So overall, this man's listenability skills are actually quite strong. All right. Moving on to the very last thing that the raters will always look at, and we call this task fulfillment. So the raters want to see how completely you've answered the question and how relevant all of your ideas are if they're on topic. This, unfortunately, is the weakest part of our speaker's response today. Remember, as one of our viewers pointed out, he's repeated that word experience all the way through his response. He really only has that one piece of advice or that one suggestion to give to his friend about moving. So it doesn't provide a very thorough or complete answer. So again, that would be noticeable and would weaken the score a little bit here. His tone, though, and his length are done quite well. Those are the other parts of this dimension. So he is speaking to his friend. He's using a very encouraging tone, and the language he uses also are encouraging too. So that's very helpful. And the length was almost perfect. He was supposed to speak for 90 seconds, and he did that almost right down to the last second. So that would be noticeable and good job there. Sometimes that's hard to do on its own. So overall, here we have a summary, I guess, of the strengths and the weaknesses of this man's answer. And I'm hoping that you can start to guess what you think he earned on this particular answer on his test. So see if you can guess what level perhaps he earned. In order to do that, you have to assess all of these categories together. You're always looking at the strengths and the weaknesses as a balance. So remember, even though his response is well organized and flows well, there's only really one strong suggestion or one piece of advice. So that hurts the content. And then later on, also task fulfillment because he hasn't answered the question fully. His vocabulary is quite on point, though. He does have a lot of suitable language, but remember, he repeats 2 or 3 words over and over. His listenability, his speech is quite strong. He maybe wanted, though, to use a little bit of a higher level conjunctions as he went through his answer. So again, it's always a matter of looking at the pros, the cons, the strengths and the weaknesses, and determining what level you think that the speaker would have earned there. This is exactly how the raters go about giving you your score on the test. So I'll give you just about 10 seconds or so just to think about this at home before I reveal. Again, feel free if you'd like to guess in the live feed. You're more than welcome. But I'll show you the answer in just a moment. Okay. So again, I guess it's a decent response. So I guess you're trying to figure out if this is a good response. Is it effective? Is it advanced? You know, where does it fit? And I'm going to reveal it right now. So here we are. This is a level 8 response. Our speaker did a lot of things quite well, but he didn't quite, I guess, answer the question fully enough or demonstrate enough complexity there to earn a higher score into the level 9 or higher. All right, so this is where hopefully some of your ideas are going to help us out. This is hi,
it's me again.
Yeah,
sorry to interrupt you, but we've got. I've been showing it on the screen here. We've got one person who suggested. Fernando suggested 8 or 9, and then Hope suggests 9.
Okay.
Ravi was a little hard, like a strict correct. He suggests 5.
That's really no. It's not a level 5. The main difference between levels 8 and 9 would be, again, comes down to complexity a lot of the time. So when we think back to the speaker's vocabulary, a lot of it was suitable, but there wasn't a lot of evidence of more precise and specific higher level words. So again, if we're going to use words like thing 5 times in our answer, it's not quite demonstrating consistent complexity there. He did have some emerging complex sentence structures, but again, there were also some simple sentences and examples of where he's not connecting the sentences together correctly using the appropriate joining word. So again, it's close. I think had this test taker provided more pieces of advice and more fully answered this question, it would have helped immensely get him up into the level 9 or higher. And that's what I'm hoping to do right now with some of your help. So I'm hoping you've been thinking really hard about how you would answer this question if it was your test. And I invite you now to share any ideas, if you haven't already, into that live feed. So if there are any pieces of advice you would give a friend about moving overseas, I'll ask Ashwati maybe to help read some of them out and we can discuss them together.
Hello. So in the beginning of this episode, a few people, I'm going to let people share. You're welcome to share your suggestions now. But in the beginning of this episode, even before you had started analyzing the answer, somebody had shared a few points of advice. So I'm going to share them here. So Abhishek says he shared, I think, 2 or 3 points. For his first point, first advice or the first point for convincing his friend was the salary. He said that moving overseas, there are chances that you will be better paid. And he also said exposure, which I guess our speaker mentioned as well.
Yeah.
Ravi mentioned learning their culture. And Ravi is also mentioning savings, which I think is also a great point.
Yeah.
And then Abhishek comes back to mention working in a multilingual society.
And I think that one, it connects a little bit to our speaker's conclusion, talking about how you'll have more exposure, more experience on a job resume as well. So or are you looking more at improving your own skill set to make yourself more marketable for future if it's a multilingual society? So I like that idea. I would just extend it a little bit further. So explain to your friend how that's going to help him decide whether or not the move is right for him. Okay, so he's trying to figure out why he should move or should not move. So if you're using that idea, coach it in a way that really helps him decide that. All right, good. Are there any last minute ideas to come in? I've got some ideas of my own too I'd like to share, which are already some of the ones you've mentioned. But let's see if we've got just a few more.
Okay, I'm going to wait here with you, but I don't see anything coming so far. I think people are eager to hear what you have to say.
Okay, that's right. If you do come up with further ideas, maybe type them in anyway. And we'll go on. I'll start to share some of the ideas that I've sort of compiled, and then we'll go from there. So again, some of the ideas you've come up with, I thought of. Some of them also are novel, so I'll share them now. I would, if it were me moving overseas or my friend was moving, I would encourage them very strongly to think about their living arrangements, maybe even before we start looking at the budget and the salary. So if you are actually speaking to a friend on the CELPIP test, you're very welcome to invent details that make sense and that are logical. So for example, you could say to your friend, I think our speaker used the friend Mark in his answer. So you might say something like, Mark, here at home, you've always lived with your family. So when you move overseas, you very well could be living by yourself or even with a roommate who is a stranger to you. So ask yourself, are you prepared to leave home and go so far away? Will you be lonely? And is that going to affect your job performance and your enjoyment? So something like that would work very nicely. You notice how we're creating the details about living with your family, assuming that you would know that about your friend. And you're very welcome to do that on the test. Make these ideas up that suit the question. Budget is huge. So I think that was mentioned about salary as well. And I think this comes down to maybe two different things. The first thing I would definitely tell my friend is to consider the amount of money you're going to make against all the expenses that you're going to incur, right? We need to be making more money than we're spending at the end of the day. We hope to be anyway. So I would use specific examples about the budget. So in other words, how much is your rent going to be if you move overseas? How much are groceries there in the city that you'll be living in? What about the bills? Will you have enough money to pay for those? You might even mention about entertainment. I know that your friend's moving for work, but you might say, it's not all about work. You'll need some time to de-stress and unwind. So will you have savings left over to have some entertainment as well? So again, some of your ideas fit really nicely into that main idea with the supporting example. Another detail you might invent that could support your friend's decision again has to do a little bit with their own lifestyle. So again, they're going over there to work, but if you knew your friend well enough and you knew that they were, say, an avid runner who likes to go out after a long day at the office and de-stress by enjoying the scenic views of the city and the environment, you could ask your friend, are you going to have access to the same scenic environment that you need to keep yourself stable as you're working? You might also, if your friend is an avid theater goer or is a foodie and likes to eat out in restaurants, you might say, you'll be busy working a full job at the office. So are there going to be lots of amenities around where you can actually grab your lunch or just enjoy a night out with your coworkers after work? Are you going to have that? So will you enjoy yourself and be stable living there as well? So these are some details you could throw in. This was mentioned, I think, by one of you, something to do with cultural differences too. And our speaker addressed this to a point. He did talk about learning the culture. So again, when we move to a new city or country, especially one so far away, we have to ask ourselves, are we going to understand the customs and fit in? Are we going to be able to make friends and have a support group while we're there, whether we're working or not, frankly? Will we be so homesick that we won't be able to perform at our best in the office? So think about those things. And this is a really important one that I don't think was mentioned. I don't know if anyone's thought of it yet, but job security is key. So I would say to my friend, what type of a job is this? Is there career longevity? In other words, if you uproot your life and move all the way overseas, are you going to have this career for as long as you'd like it? Or is it just a contract that finishes in a year? And then what? You're stuck unemployed and don't know what to do next. So consider how permanent this job is before you move. And also consider job advancement. Is it worth your while to move so far away? Will you be able to climb that work structure ladder and maybe be promoted to a higher position if that's what you want? So these are some of the specific details that I'm hoping that we can draw into our answers.
Hi, Brandy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think the conversation, like your suggestion of ideas has churned out some few suggestions here as well. Shobit says, you need to remember to arrange local currency for any needs that you need as soon as you land there. And then Ankit says, good standard of living.
Okay.
Ensuring that the place you're going to has good standards of living. There's also my favorite, consider the weather before you move so that you're prepared.
I never thought of the weather. That's a fantastic one. Good standards of living and weather might fit in nicely to this leisure time and lifestyle idea. I can see very nicely how that would be the case. Yeah, for sure. Again, if you live in a country where it rains all the time and you move to a sunny place, great, but not the opposite, right? Nice.
Yes, there's also Amy who mentions consider the location where you will stay and that it should be accessible.
Accessible to, let's expand on that, accessible to public transit, maybe? Or if it's a walkable neighborhood, can you get to work fairly quickly? Are you going to be living close by the work? Is this what we mean by accessible?
I don't know. Amy, if you're still listening, please expand on that so that we can have a complete conversation about it. Yep. So I think those are the good suggestions we got here.
Fantastic. See, this is why it's nice to put our ideas together. I hadn't thought about the weather, but it seems like such a basic idea, but it works, right? Yeah. So again, with all these ideas coming in, I think we've talked about 8 or 10 of them at least. In a 90-second answer, you're not going to have time to include all 10 ideas, and you won't have time to think about that many on the spot. So what we want to do during that preparation time is just start listing down some of your main ideas on that piece of paper. And I'm hoping that on the spot, when you start speaking, some of these examples will come to you and you'll be able to take the idea and expand it. So I'd like to show you how that might look now. So we're really going to take our speaker's initial transcript, which is what we see here on the screen, and we're just going to walk through it and replace some of this repetitive, vague language with some of the ideas that we've just been talking about. All right, so I like the speaker's opening. I think he supports his friend nicely by saying it's a great opportunity, go overseas. So that's all well and fine. And then the first idea really that our speaker addresses is this notion about you might want to stay with your family or your colleagues. So we're going to take that idea and just expand it, make it very specific, because the rest of this idea just repeats about having a new opportunity. So let's remove that for now and replace it with something more specific like this. So now we can say, before you move, make sure that you'll be comfortable living so far away from your friends and family. You've never lived by yourself before, so this might take some getting used to. You don't want to be lonely while you live abroad. So can you see how that's an improvement over just something to do with family, right? We're being very specific. We're also creating some complex sentence structures and adding in some very nice vocabulary, like saying, well, you live abroad is a good way to coach that. The next answer here that our speaker was talking about is, again, this notion of learning the culture, which a lot of us were thinking of, culture shock and things like that. But the rest of his idea in his answer talks all about, again, just gaining experience and going overseas. So we're going to remove the repetitive ideas and we're going to really get specific. So the red words here represent the specific ideas added. We might say something like, try to learn about the culture before you accept this position and relocate. You'll meet different people overseas, but remember that culture shock can sometimes make us feel isolated. So decide if the city is the right place for you. Okay, so again, we're always getting our friend to think about it before making a decision. So that's maybe how I would frame some of our pieces of advice. That next idea there, where he starts with then again, and I like that. I think that's a great transition. But when you look at the idea that comes next, again, it's more of the same. It's just talking about having new roles, new opportunity. It might work, it might not. There's really not any specific pieces of advice. And a lot of us thought about money and salary and savings. And I think that's crucial. I think that's one of the most important pieces of advice that we need to give here. So let's just add that in right now. Something like this would work. We can say, then again, I guess it's crucial that you enjoy the work you'll be doing overseas. Will you have job stability? And will you be earning a high enough salary to pay for your move and your cost of living over there? It'd be wise to plan your budget now so you'll know how much your rent, bills, and groceries will cost. So you see again how specific we're getting. We're not just saying you need to check your salary. We're saying you need to know how much rent, bills, groceries are going to be, and so on. This would be a really nice place to get in some of the ideas coming into. I can see them of the fun stuff and the lifestyle and the standard of living, as some of you said. So just pick an example, a couple of specific examples, and add them in. So we might say, hopefully you'll have enough money left over for entertainment, like dining out or seeing a rock concert or something to that effect. That would work well. I like the ending of this response already. I think it's nice to end off with how your own resume is going to be bolstered or supported. The viewer earlier that suggested about exposing yourself to a multilingual society, that's something that you might work in here actually when you talk about your resume. So just think about all the things that you're going to improve or build upon, strengthen your own skill set. So that might be one, exposure to other languages, and then that you're making yourself more marketable. So that's a good idea to put here. I didn't work that in because I hadn't thought of it myself, but I can see how it would fit. I think if we leave the answer the way it is for now, it's okay. All we can do is take out some of that repetitive language again. We don't need to know about if you move, if you don't. And we've taken out a couple of those words that make these little grammar mistakes. And those purple words, I just added in a few words to connect the ideas a little bit more smoothly. So I basically have fixed the writing mistake, but the idea is still the same, talking about those experiences. So this is just one way to improve a response, to make it more specific. That was the biggest weakness here. There was not enough pieces of advice to get our friend to think about this big life decision. So again, task fulfillment was the weakest part of the answer. And once we've added in all these pieces of advice, again, we've improved all the other dimensions. We have so many more examples of complex sentences. We've really elevated the vocabulary, everything specific. There's none of this thing, and we've left in some of the nice transitions and ideas. But again, it's at a much higher level. I don't know what level this would receive on a real test because it's been written by us, so it's not being professionally rated. But I'm hoping we can agree that this would certainly be higher than the level 8 where we started. Are there any last minute ideas that maybe we'd like to share before we take questions?
Hi.
Sure. As a matter of fact, why don't I stop sharing my screen now and I'll come right back and then we can talk. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing now and come back to the crew. All right, I'm back.
Welcome back.
Hi.
One thing is that Amy clarified what she meant by accessibility. She's talking about, wait, let me go back there. She's talking about access to your workplace. She's talking about access. So here, accessible to places like work, school, parks, etc. Also accessible to main roads and traffic flow.
Yes. And I sort of assumed accessibility meant, that word means how easy it is to achieve something, but what I was hoping for was the specific thing that you were achieving. I like, again, to work this into the lifestyle. So I think talking about, community, park, and so on, I think that's great. I think really honing in on the workplace would strengthen the response even more because, again, the whole question was about job. We're going overseas for a job. So the idea of, is it accessible to even get to the office? Can you work? Can you walk there? Can you cycle there if that's important to you? Can you run there? Or if not, are there bus routes that take you nearby that won't cost too much money? So again, you can connect that into the budget. So all these ideas are so strong. We're getting more specific, but I'm hoping you're starting to make those connections on your own. You're starting to see how there are so many ideas that you can fit together in so many different ways. Like there's a gazillion ways you could present this answer, right? I love that idea, Amy. I think it's a great one. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Amy, for the clarification. So earlier when we were starting, we had a couple of questions that they're related to speaking task 1, but they're not related to maybe the specific topic of your friend going overseas. I'm going to share them here. I think one of the first questions was, how many points do we need to provide as advice for this task, and they clarified what they mean by points. For instance, if I'm asked to give advice to my friend about which movie to rent tonight, should I go ahead and advise him about only one movie, or can I include multiple options in my advice?
Yeah, so again, to clarify, that question is clearly different from the one we're talking about today. The number of main ideas that you present, there's never a steadfast rule for any CELPIP task. It always depends, first of all, on for speaking, how long do you have to speak? So this is the point. For a 90-second answer, you're going to need probably more than just one piece of advice to avoid all of that repetition and vague language. So we can't just say you have to have 4 pieces of advice. You have to have 5. It depends also on how much you expand and support those ideas. So remember the final revised answer I showed you, for each point that we added in, I think I had about 3 sentences. When you go back and look at the color coding, right? Each main point, we take about 3 sentences to explain those. So the more detail you have, the fewer main ideas you're going to have time to present. That just makes sense, right? To answer Shobit's question about if you're recommending a movie or so, you'd probably in 90 seconds need to have at least a couple or 3 movies to talk about, I would say, just to keep the response moving along. Yeah, so it's kind of a spontaneous decision on the spot. Keep an eye on your timer. When you see that you still have 30 seconds left to talk, you've got time to add another main idea in. But don't just repeat the same idea over and over to get to the end. That's kind of what our speaker did today in his initial response, right? Over and over with, oh, you'll get experience. Oh, it'll be a great opportunity. And he did that until he filled 90 seconds. And that's not the best approach. Make it varied and interesting to attract and hold the listener's attention.
Great. Thank you for that, Shobit. I hope that answers your question. We have another question. It's a more general question about the CELPIP test. I'm going to share that here. What is the role of grammar in the CELPIP test?
Well, grammar speaking, if you don't use correct grammatical structures, people are not going to understand what it is you're trying to communicate. So whether you're speaking or writing, we have to have specifically correct word choice and correct sentence structure. When we don't have those 2 things, it's oftentimes it can be impossible to even understand the idea that you mean. So it's extremely important just in daily communication, not only for CELPIP. Grammar itself is assessed specifically under that 3rd dimension, which we call listenability. So that's specifically where the raters are going to really look at your grammar. All right. But again, you can see how it affects the whole piece. Because if your grammar is so weak that we really don't know what you're saying, well, then how do we assess your content? Because the ideas no longer make sense, right? So it sort of has a domino effect. So yeah, you can study certain grammar things at home. I know, again, we're still in this darn pandemic, so maybe you've got time on your hands at home if you're on lockdown or such. I think really learning your sentence structure is key. Study your conjunctions, please. There are many groups of connecting words in English, and when you know how to use those words to connect your ideas together smoothly, that's going to help immensely for everything else. So if there's one grammar point you're going to learn, please understand how to make a simple, compound, and complex sentence. You can do that at your own pace at home. There's lots of resources online, so please try that part at least.
Great. Thank you, Brandy. And I hope that answers your question, Sarabjit. So we have another question regarding the way we convey our advice. Is it possible to score if I suggest ideas in bullet points?
Well, for speaking, that's a moot point, because remember, in speaking, you would never have a transcript. So you would just be speaking in full sentences. When you are speaking, please do use complete sentences. Even if it's a casual conversation with a friend, the raters are assessing your grammar, as we just said. It's imperative, really important, that you use complete and full sentence structure all the time, okay? In writing, do not use bulleted points either, because again, the raters are interested to see how your ability to create more complex sentence structure. If all you're doing is writing short little phrases, bulleted, you're not showing off your ability. You might know how to write a complex compound sentence, but you're not showing it when you're using bulleted points. So I would recommend no, please don't.
That's a great answer, and I really like that answer. It makes me understand a little more about what the raters are looking for. Okay. Let's see if we have any other questions. Actually, we have one from Brandy. Is it okay to give one idea but fully developed?
I guess it could. Like, it depends on how many different details of support you have to develop that one idea. To be honest, of all the sample responses I've ever looked at, I've not yet seen an answer that successfully does that. You know, to fill 60 seconds or 90 seconds with one idea and to just give tons and tons of supporting detail is actually harder to do than to just give, you know, 2 or 3 main ideas and think of smaller chunks of detail, right? So yeah, I wouldn't advise it. I just don't know if it's possible to effectively get to the end of a 60-second or 90-second answer without repeating yourself over and over. So yeah, I wouldn't advise that, Randy. I don't think that's the best way to go. At least 2 is helpful. Even 3 is better.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have another question from Amy. Is it okay to use phrasal verbs in all speaking tasks?
Phrasal verbs are basically when you take like an action verb and you put a preposition after it. So I went down to the cinema today, for example, right? Went down is a phrasal verb in that regard. Phrasal verbs tend to make your language more casual, but if you're speaking to a friend, then that's okay. So in the answer we were just looking at where the speaker was advising Mark about moving to a new country, hey, why not? Phrasal casual language and expressions like, you know, that was very suitable. So yeah, no problem there for the CELPIP test anyway.
Okay, great. I'm gonna wait for a couple more seconds, but I think those are the questions we've had so far. Yep, I think those were the questions we've had so far. But thank you, Brandy. This was great. We have a lot of people who've joined us today, and I think that this is something that they'll really benefit from. Okay, so earlier, when you suggested, when you were giving out ideas about what we could use, Fernando mentioned that these are great, like we're giving great suggestions, but the difficult part is being able to remember all these suggestions in 30 seconds.
Yeah. So again, if you review this episode later, it'll be recorded on our YouTube channel here. If you go back to the chart that I created where I had like one side said main idea, the other side said specific details. I'm glad you asked this question. It's a good point, Fernando. In 30 seconds, you were not going to have time to create that chart that I did, you know, with all the nice arrows and all those specific ideas explained. In 30 seconds, what you should be able to do is come up with at least 3 main ideas. And they can be one word each. So if you've got your piece of paper in front of you on your test and you write down the words budget, lifestyle, accessibility, and that's it, you should have enough time to think of those ideas and get those 3 words down. The next skill, and this is where you practice at home, is how do you speak out loud by just taking those words from the page and creating full sentence structures like we did in the sample that we gave. That takes a tremendous amount of practice because when you say things like budget, off the top of your head while you're speaking in live time, you'd have to think logically, well, if I were moving overseas, where's my money going to go? So when you introduce this notion about budget, you say to Mark, have you considered your budget? On the spot, you say, you know, things like your rent, your groceries, your bills, these are all expenses. And you need to make sure that your salary is going to support that so you can afford to stay there. So I just demonstrated what I'm hoping you'll be able to do with practice. Again, just take that one word budget, just think about it logically. Put yourself in the position of the speaker or the person that's listening. Like what would they need to know in order to move overseas? So it's a matter of being a bit flexible and spontaneous on the spot. This is easiest done when you have a strong vocabulary. When we don't have the words to make those ideas, it becomes quite difficult. Okay, so practicing at home, you know what I would say too, Fernando, is don't worry so much about the time at first. When you're practicing at home, I would just focus on getting logical ideas down and then just practice saying them out loud until they form complete sentences. Don't worry about your time or how you sound. Once you get those ideas comfortably, that's when you set a timer and say, how many ideas can I come up with now in 30 seconds? And you go. And then can I actually take those ideas now and make a 90-second answer? You just keep doing it over and over until you can actually accomplish that fact. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer. I got a little carried away with my explanation, but I'm hoping it makes sense. So just keep practicing at home.
No, thank you. That was a really good answer. And I hope that answers your question, Fernando. We have another question. So we have 2 more questions. One is from Anu, and she asks, how important is it to incorporate your own experience while giving advice?
Yeah, so Anu, you don't have to use your own experience, but I think it's definitely the easiest, right? We all know what we've done in life, for good or for bad. So drawing on your own examples there is just the easiest way to come up with ideas on the spot. When we talk about what we know, that's when we're most confident. So if at all possible, I would recommend that you do actually draw on your own experience. if you've never moved overseas before or far away from home, hopefully you'll be able to relate to that question, to imagine that situation. And again, it's almost like your own personal role play. Imagine you are the person moving. What would you need to do? So you're still kind of drawing on your own personal ideas as you're putting yourself in that position. Yeah, it's the easiest way to go. Talk about what you know. It's usually your own life.
Great. And we have another question. That's the last one. How to structure the best sentences.
Yeah. So again, it's scaffolding your skill set. So you're starting off by understanding first how to create a simple sentence structure. So we need to know what a subject, verb, and an object is, I guess. Once you've got that, you're going to then learn how to connect the short ideas together to make compound. Once you've got that, you add on the complex ideas too. So learning the different groups of conjunctions is going to be crucial. I won't get into a big grammar lesson now, as much as I'd love to talk about this all day. I love it. But the compound sentences, there are like 7 words you need to know. We call them the fanboys words, right? Yeah, anyway. Shwati's going like this. The words are for and nor, and then boys, but, or, yet, so. So the word fanboys is what we call an acronym. It's not a real word, but if you can remember the word fanboys in your head and just take the first letter of each of those, like F-A-N for fan, that will remind you what the connecting words are. So the F is for, A is for and, N is for nor. Have you never heard this, Ashwati?
No, but I do want to correct you with that fanboy is a real word.
Oh, is it? Yes. I thought it was made up anyway. And then
it's a word now. I don't know, like it's a millennial word or Gen Z word, but it does exist. But no, I have never heard of that acronym, and it sounds like it would be really helpful.
Yeah, maybe I should do a little lesson on tools to remember these things. Yeah, boys, like B, but, O, or, Y, yet, and then S, so. So again, you got these 7 words, and then you just practice. You have to know how to use them correctly, and so on. Anyway, it's a step-by-step process. You can't learn it all like this. Please don't start with complex sentences because they're complex. They're hard to do. There's so many rules. But again, if you start simple and understand how to just make a complete sentence, then there are so many ways that you can actually add on to that. We have lots of resources in our CELPIP bookstore, but again, you can do your own search. There's so many resources available to you online for free as well. So you can do a Google search and just start learning. There will be tons of examples there, but you have to practice. So Hitesh, just don't read, produce. Take the examples that you're reading and learning about, write your own sentences using the examples as a guide. If you're not practicing your actual writing, it's hard to improve. So that's important too.
On that note, we have questions about. So McNaught has a question. I'll club both of them. How to eliminate saying too much or etc. And then also how to avoid long pauses.
Yeah. Okay. You're not going to like my answer, but really it boils down to 2 things. First of all, vocabulary development. Again, it's crucial. When you have a very strong and wide-ranging vocabulary, you're not going to hesitate so much to grab the right word that you're looking for. Okay, we interject often and pause often because we don't know what we're going to say next. So that could be a vocabulary issue. It also is a completely different skill set to generate ideas quickly, to brainstorm. And this again goes back to practicing at home without timing yourself at first. You need to actually understand how to come up with ideas that are suitable for the question and actually answer the question. So do that first and then set your timer as well. Comes down to confidence too. So I know for me, if I was giving a presentation or practicing for the CELPIP test, I would take one question like we did today about giving advice to a friend about moving. I would come up with my own answers on a note paper like we did and practice saying my answer to that question as many times as it took me until I could do it in 90 seconds. So if I have to repeat my answer out loud 20 times today and then 20 times tomorrow, I'm going to continue to do that. The more you say the same ideas, it's almost like memorizing a script for a drama play on stage. The more you repeat those same ideas out loud, the easier the words and the ideas come the next time you practice saying it, right? So again, it's repetition. And eventually you get to the point where you're not pausing so much and you're not interjecting, okay? And that skill will translate eventually into new questions on the spot. Because again, on the CELPIP test, you're not going to have the benefit of practicing the same question over and over. But at home, that's one strategy to use so that you'll be prepared when you get the question on the test and say, okay, I've done this before. I can come up with ideas and then put them into my own words. So it's partly about confidence too. Yeah,
Great. Thank you. And I just wanted to tell the audience that I didn't mean to rush you when I said last question. You were welcome to ask your questions. I just meant that at the time, that was the last question. Ankit has asked this question, and I have a part answer for this, but I will also let you answer this, Brandy. How can we learn suitable wide range of vocabulary? For example, any books, website that you'd like to recommend? So the reason I said I wanted to answer this was because, Ankit, we do have an episode entirely dedicated to the books you can read, TV shows you can watch, games you can play, and movies you can watch that will help you develop your English language skills. But I'm also going to let Brandy answer this question.
Yeah, and it's hard. I get this question a lot, like, what would you recommend? And it's hard for me to make a personal recommendation because I would need to know two things. I would need to know, first of all, what your current level is and what your interests are. So one of the biggest mistakes I would say that people make is they choose a reading resource that is so far above their current language ability that they really don't understand even the basic ideas, let alone the vocabulary. So whatever choice you make for readings that you're doing, you have to make sure that you're understanding, I would say, at least about 80% of the content. So if you can read something and understand the gist of it, you get what the main idea is. But there are maybe about, 10 words, let's just say, in the article that you're not really familiar with, but there are enough ideas nearby those new words that you can start to make some guesses and understand more fully what the new vocab's telling you. That's when you know you're reading at the right level. If you aim too high, it's going to be too difficult. Again, if it's so easy that you understand everything, you're never going to learn new words, right? So it's a matter of choosing level appropriate articles or books or news articles, whatever you're reading. The next step is please make sure it's something you enjoy reading. Honestly, I know if we're in an English class, sometimes we have to read the book the teacher assigns. Sometimes we don't like the book the teacher assigns. I know we've all been there, myself included. So I think whatever you choose to read, if you're engaged and interested in learning more about it, then you're going to want to put in the work and you'll be motivated, I guess, to pull out the words as well. Okay. Again, I think we did an episode, was it for CELPIP Ashwati, where I gave a lot of other tips on how to start your journal and practice vocabulary. Yeah. So well, maybe, I don't know if you can link that in. I won't get into it now because it's quite long and we're almost at the end of time. But I hope it gives you some ideas. But yeah.
Yeah. We did, like I said, we have many episodes on this. We also have an episode where Brandy and our other instructor, Megan, are actually sharing books that they read, that they liked, that you can also read to improve your reading and vocabulary skills. Brandy, I do want to say that as a kid, the only subject that I really liked was English. I liked chemistry a little bit, but English was my favorite. So I was the nerd that would read all the books before school started. I read Great Expectations that way. I read Oliver Twist that way. I would just read it before. And this is not to say that I was an extremely well-performing kid, but I would be the one that, because I just like to read stories. Like if I knew that it was a book that was telling me a story, I would enjoy reading it. And I guess that helped me kind of pay attention.
No, exactly. Yeah. See, I prefer fiction. I like, maybe it's escapist. Like I like to just read stuff with characters that are really I'm engaged with and I want to know what happens to them. So that would be my choice. But some people like to read the nonfiction. They like a biography and learn about a real life person. And that's all fun and well. So yeah, there's so many things to choose. Ashwati, I would never read about chemistry though.
No, me neither. I wouldn't read about chemistry because there's no story, or some people would argue that there is a story. But for me, chemistry was, I would read biology. Like I would read about animals and I would read about plants, but I would read them. This is not to say that reading helped me write good tests and perform well, but reading stories really helped me. So I was gonna end this, but Anu has a last question. Okay. If one uses idioms and phrases to make a point, will it fetch more scores?
So vocabulary itself is assessed kind of as a whole piece. We want to see that the vocab is naturally used and suitable for the task. So you could achieve the same score whether you used idioms or not, depending on how naturally and suitable the rest of your language is. So you're not going to necessarily earn higher marks just because you've inserted a couple of idioms, but you also wouldn't lose marks just because you didn't, if that makes any sense. Then it's all about making sure the language choice is natural and suits the question that you are answering. So might be, idioms might not be, really up to you.
Perfect. Okay, great. So thank you, Brandy, for joining us, and thank you for staying on and answering our viewer questions. We look forward to your next episode as well.
Okay, sounds good. Let me know what you need practice into, please, everyone, and we'll see what we can do for you. If you'd like to do some more speaking, great. If there's something else you'd like to do, let me know, and we'll see what we can do.
Perfect. So that was Brandy, and like she mentioned, please let us know in the comments below if you have anything specific you'd like us to talk about, even if it's not anything specific to the test. For example, Ankit asked about vocabulary and how to improve vocabulary. We have done an episode like that, but if you have anything you'd like to ask in terms of improving your general understanding of the English language, do let us know as well. Even if you want to know something about Canada, you can let us know, and we'll see if we can help you out. Also, please remember to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and more importantly, share this with anybody else who you know might be giving the CELPIP test and needs some further help. Over the past few months, we have been interviewing CELPIP test takers to hear about their experience and journey while writing the CELPIP test. We're doing this as an effort to hear from our test takers, but also more importantly, help guys who are going to be writing the CELPIP test. So if you have written the CELPIP test and you want to share your feedback, please reach out to us at communications@paragontesting.ca. And you can also watch previous test takers. We just spoke. Our recent one is Karan, who I think gave his test during the pandemic, so he has a few tips as well. Our next episode will be on April 27th. So if you have questions you couldn't get answered today, please comment below, or again, send us an email at communications@paragontesting.ca, and we will address it on our next episode. Like I mentioned before, you can also suggest topics. You can also connect with us on our social media. We're pretty chatty there. So if you have any questions you want to ask, shoot us a DM on Instagram or Facebook, drop a comment, and somebody will respond to you. But until our next episode, please stay safe and have a nice day. Bye.